Thanks for coming to join us today. My name is Larsen Jensen. I'm the founder of Harpoon Ventures, a early-stage, dual-use focused venture capital firm. And I'm joined by Ryan Tseng, the founder of Shield AI. Thanks for joining us, Ryan.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Ryan, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what Shield AI does?
Let's see. Shield AI, if you haven't heard of it, is a company that's about 9 years old now, and it's focused on the mission of protecting service members and civilians with intelligent systems. And the way that we're going about achieving that mission is by focusing on building what we call the world's best AI pilot. So enabling aircraft to see, think, and act, in particular for defense and security applications, without the need for a human operator to be in command and control of the aircraft.
Why did you start this business? It seems like, I remember actually when you were starting this, I served with, your brother in the SEAL teams. And I remember when you guys were going around Silicon Valley pitching it and talking to early stage investors. At the time, defense tech was somewhat faux pas. You can correct me if I'm wrong. It's something that I imagine not everybody bought into. What gave you guys the conviction to go out there and do this in an environment then that is much different than it is now?
Yeah, good question. Actually, standing over there, Larsen said, I was showing him some pictures of some of the work that we were doing, and he said, did you ever imagine, you would be working on this sort of stuff? And the answer is no. My journey to Shield, I guess, started toward the tail end of my time at Qualcomm. I had started and sold a company to Qualcomm. It did wireless charging. I led the wireless charging group at Qualcomm. I like to believe that my team and then my team at Qualcomm meaningfully contributed to taking that from a napkin to something that probably has over 1 billion deployments at this stage. But toward the tail end of my time at Qualcomm, I felt like I didn't have the fire in the belly that I had throughout my career. Growing up, my parents always said work hard, and so I did. And I just prided myself on being able to outwork anybody no matter what I was doing. And in the last year of Qualcomm, I felt like I was breaking a sweat, didn't know why, and decided to take time off and reflect on what it was that motivated me. And I decided that if I could find 3 things, I'd have that fire in the belly, not just for the next year, but for the next 50 years, and it would be the opportunity to work on a noble mission, the opportunity to work with extraordinary people, and the opportunity to define the possible. And so I went about looking for these things, and my brother was a Navy SEAL like Larsen here, and he asked if I would help him prepare for his business school interview. My brother and I are quite competitive. We never ask each other for help, and so to this day, I'm convinced that my mom forced him to ask me for help. And so in this interview, I asked, what's the most challenging circumstance you faced, and what did you do about it? And I thought back to my own answer. It was super lame, but it got me into school, and what my brother shared with me brought me to tears. And it was a story of service and sacrifice on behalf of team members and civilians around the world. And I remember thinking to myself, what an incredible mission. And I told him he needed to think about what he wanted to do in life. And he came back several weeks later and said, Ryan, I'd like to start a company to bring the best of what's happened in the autonomous driving sector to the mission of protecting service members and civilians. And I told him, it's a great mission. Terrible business, best of luck. And so Brandon, like all SEALs, is very persistent. Larsen, I'm sure shares that trait. And he said, what do you need to see? And I encouraged him to talk to 100 different people. He said, fine, I'll do it, but would you join me? And the thing that I was shocked to learn was that the mission that my brother executed and SEALs executed which was clearing buildings of threats principally, had killed more service members and civilians than any other mission type in the preceding 20 years. And very little was being done about it. There was fundamentally no ability to get eyes and ears in places where we needed them to fight and win or to deter conflict. It extended from a house to entire geographic regions today. And so it felt like this really big, important problem that was worth getting after. And so sort of at that point, I told my brother, if we can get one of the very best people in the world in the field of AI to start the company, we'll do it. So that's how I ended up starting Shield AI with my brother and then our technical co-founder.
What got you over the edge of, this is a great mission, there's no doubt that this capability needs to exist to save service members and civilians' lives, but what made you think that this could actually be a business? And then we can get into how things have progressed since then.
It was probably, a combination of my brother's enthusiasm and my ignorance. And then, look, at the time, as you said, in 2015, starting a company focused on the defense market was considered a pretty terrible idea. And there's a long list of reasons for that. And there was actually a particular moment. We had convinced our technical co-founder to join us. I went to MIT, and so I said, hey, I asked my friends, who's the best in the world at AI? I got a list of 5 names. So I was like, Brandon, it has to be one of these 5 people. So we went down the list, called one of them on Skype. His name was Andrew Ryder, who was leading the most successful vision navigation program in the history of Draper Laboratory. And he agreed to quit his job and join us. And so my job was to raise the money. Andrew's job was to build the product, and Brandon was going to help us find the customer. And so we went out to Silicon Valley after we had this prototype that we were very proud of. And we're going down the list and meeting everybody, and just no. I think we had 40 names, got to 39, they said no. Finally, person number, and the reasons were all the same. It's like, terrible idea to start a defense technology company. Got to number 40, and somebody offered us a term sheet. And they said, but there's a condition, which is that you change your mission, because there's no way you're going to succeed at building a defense technology company.
Wow.
And so I remember the moment very vividly. So Andrew had just quit his job, and he's like, I'm working with these 2 brothers who are clearly crazy, very enthusiastic, but have no idea what they're doing. I remember being kind of nervous for this conversation because I didn't know how Andrew, who had just, relatively recently quit his job, rising star, and was now, working on this, would handle it. And he said, look, I would rather us go out of business, trying to make an impact on the mission than take this money. And so it'd be another year before we got a second term sheet, this time for $800,000, that allowed us to start the company. And so kind of did I ever get to the point where I thought it was a good idea? I think maybe briefly, and then all of these venture investors convinced me that it was a terrible idea, but we always felt like that it was one that was worth doing. And frankly, I don't think it was until around 2020 that I felt like we started to get to a place where like, hey, you know what, this should work.
Yeah. It's very topical right now. Defense technology in the wake of Russia-Ukraine, the Israel-Hamas conflict, our great power competition in China. There's a lot of tension around the world. And as a result, I think there's a lot more attention going to national security types of technology. Having started a business when it was not in vogue, what were some of those critical things that you guys had to accomplish to achieve your first inning of success? What was your first success? And then how did you subsequently achieve critical mass, if you have yet?
So, I think the first and most meaningful thing that we accomplished was putting an AI pilot on the battlefield, like the first in history in 2018, used in the context of special operations missions and used continuously since then. It was probably, a decade ahead of when anybody thought was possible. And, I think our ability to achieve that, and then they have these things in the government, if you don't know, or the DoD, called SITREPs, so situation reports. Yeah. And some of the outcomes of the AI pilot and the operators that were trying to use it made their way all the way up to the Secretary of Defense and the Deputy Secretary of Defense at the time. And it's not something that gets talked a lot about, but I think that people realizing that AI could have an impact on the battlefield sort of set things in motion in 2018 that started to create conditions where a company focused on building the world's best AI pilot could succeed. And in addition to the work that we were doing, the world has, of course, continued to evolve. The United States, I think, as many people here know, has been the pillar of global stability since the end of World War II. And that pillar has been built around this dominance in basically every domain, but especially air dominance, which sets the conditions for fighting and winning if necessary, but more ideally deterring conflict. And the emergence of sophisticated electronic attack, the emergence of very low cost and highly effective surface-to-air missile systems has made it such that the United States no longer clearly has air dominance. And our peers around the world recognize this, and they see an aperture to act without consequence. And so one of the most important things, I would claim, and I think many people would claim at this stage for the future of, security and stability, is to restore United States and allies to a position of air dominance. And to do that, you need two things. One, you need aircraft that can operate effectively when they're under electronic attack. So no communications, no GPS, which means they need to be able to see, think, and act independently. And you need aircraft that it would be acceptable to lose, because surface-to-air missiles are extremely lethal. And relative to the cost of an aircraft, they're extremely low cost. And so it can be a 200-to-1 difference between the aircraft cost and the missile cost. And when you put that against the industrial bases of China and the United States, where we're 10-to-1 disadvantaged, the United States sits on a 2,000-to-1 disadvantage in sort of key metrics that matter in terms of our ability to deter, fight, and win. So you need to field many more aircraft. And pilot limits have been a huge factor in commercial aviation, so people probably know more about that, but the limitations of available pilots in defense applications is a major constraint as well. So then it becomes a question, well, I can build these cheaper planes, but who's going to fly them, right? And so it comes back to, again, the same technology. If I build 1 million planes, but I only have 1,000 or 10,000 pilots, I need AI that can fly the preponderance of these airplanes and allow the humans to operate the ones that are in the most consequential moments or circumstances. So a combination of what we've done, plus just the broader evolution of the global security situation, again, has just created tailwinds for our organization. And we have a long way to go, just to be clear. Yeah. I mean, Lockheed, Boeing, Northrop, they're much larger companies than Shield AI. We were a $3 billion value organization at our last round, 700 people. So much left to do, but
This is you bring up an interesting point with the incumbents, the defense primes that have consolidated to be very, very, very large. How does a relatively small company, still significant, $3 billion valuation, 700 and change people, but how do you as a startup, over the years, bring something to market when these incumbents seemingly have a lot of advantages that are unique to this space?
So I was talking to the chief engineer of the Starlink satellite system, and he said something that I liked, which is you have to find ways to achieve 10x advantage on metrics that matter, right? And I think what we have done through our focus on AI pilots is find ways to move the needle, like truly, by 10x on key operational metrics that matter. And I think this is true for any technology company, especially when you're starting. You might feel very clever in your first, second, or third year. I don't know, or at least, but I think for most people, certainly in my case, you're just not that clever, and like you're going to mess up on so many different dimensions. You need to have that thing that you're really, really good at to offset, all the ways that you can screw up and all of your incompetence. And you need that not only so you can succeed, but you need to just be so compelling that somebody's going to make a bet on you because you look irrational as a choice across basically every metric except for that one thing. And so AI pilots do move the needle in an order of magnitude way on key operational metrics, and I think that's why we've been able to succeed.
Tell me about the suite of products you currently have at Shield AI. What is the first product? I think you mentioned the smaller drone for house clearing. Mm-hmm. What are the products that you currently offer?
So, the most important product is our AI pilot. We call it Hivemind. which I don't know if anybody can relate here, but there's a game called StarCraft. I loved it when I was a kid, and Hivemind was one of the things in the game, so that's how it got its name. And it's an AI pilot that can fly anything from a quadcopter up through an F-16. In 2022, there was a lot of press about the first AI flying an F-16. That was Shield AI's AI pilot. We've since flown, I think, 6 or 7 different aircraft with the AI pilot, and our deployment time on that is now on or about 4 months from deciding to we want to put it on a plane to actually putting it on a new type of plane. And what it can do is it's just extremely mission effective. And so the thing that I can talk about probably most publicly was this contest called the Alpha Dogfight from 2020. And it pitted our AI pilot against some of the best pilots in DoD. And it went undefeated in all of its flights against human operators. Its win rates are just off the charts. I mean, it is insanely effective.
Compared to what was the best human pilot? You went undefeated, but what was second place?
Behind the human pilots, you mean?
Behind you.
Well, there's a series of companies that competed.
You said your Hivemind technology went undefeated against human pilots. How,
yes.
Just as a point of comparison, how did the human pilots do?
Well, they just don't win.
Not even close.
It's very difficult to win.
Yeah.
And one of the actually interesting things technologically is that the AI is not even making decisions that much faster. It just has so much experience. An average human pilot, they measure their experience in thousands of hours, on the high side. And a human pilot and an AI pilot can have its experience be, thousands of years before it ever gets into a cockpit, right? And so it has seen every situation, every permutation, and it's been able to reason about the most effective tactics and strategies when presented those circumstances.
Wow. What's the future of Shield AI? What's next?
It's a good question. Well, if you go through the Reagan Airport, you might see some of our marketing collateral, which says the greatest victory requires no war. And this has been an aspiration for humanity for quite some time, clearly not been achieved. But again, I think it's a worthwhile mission. And so at Shield, we sort of ask ourselves the fundamental question, how can we move the needle on a challenge that has seen so little progress after so much time, and we just say it's to build one of the great technology companies of this generation. So at some point, a couple decades in the future, it's our aspiration to be a company the scope and scale of an Apple, focused on the mission of protecting service members and civilians. Now, if that's the aim point, the next several years look like bringing intelligence-forming aircraft to the battlefield. It's something that we intend to do this year, and what will be another first-in-history moment. From a business perspective, I know there are a lot of investors here. It's our intent to be profitable in 2025, unless we decide to make more investments, and I think we have a lot of good investments. So we'll see whether or not we stick to that objective, but certainly something that it's penciled in as our objective for 2025, and then 2026. It's our intent to commercialize the AI pilot on military jet aircraft. So we're flying it extensively. We have been doing it since 2022, but deploying it truly at scale in real operational conditions by 2026. So that's the next. There's the end, and there's like the next 3 years for you.
Yeah. Well, before we get to questions, so I guess a read ahead for the group here, if folks have questions, we're going to do that in a second. What are our adversaries doing? Do they have a technology, their own version of Shield AI that they're developing or bringing to bear, or are we maintaining our technological dominance and prowess by virtue of the great work that you and others are doing here?
I think that the United States is in a difficult position competitively. our industrial base is hopelessly undersized for conflict relative to some of our peers. Like our shipbuilding capacity is, it's easier to say this way, China has 260 times more shipbuilding capacity than the United States. It's insane. And where we should be effective, and I think one of America's great technological strengths is in software and artificial intelligence. And so I think we have a lot of infrastructure in terms of the NVIDIAs, the Googles, the Facebooks, the Microsofts of the world that goes a long way. But the specialization to defense applications is something that is very hard to do, and I think it's very hard for the country to do, simply because of the paucity of talent that's available to work in the space. And so we can see things that, everybody knows what the future is. China does, Russia does, the United States, with China probably most notably. And, they're all chasing AI pilots. They're all chasing intelligent, affordable mass. And so everyone has the same intent, same mobilization objective. And of course, I don't know what they're doing, but I can tell you that I think the situation of the United States is a challenged one right now.
Yeah. Well, I think it's safe to say that we need you to help deter future conflicts, and heaven forbid that we have to be a part of them. We need you even more to help protect ourselves, our allies, and our interests around the world. And so it's really inspirational for me to be up here with you to help you share your story with this group. But I do want to give, in the few minutes we've got left here, the audience the opportunity to chime in and ask Ryan any questions you might have. Paul, go ahead.
Sure. So, Ryan, can you tell us what the defense primes are doing relative to AI? How competitive are they? What do you see them doing relative to shield AI in the near term?
So the question is, what are the defense primes doing in AI relative to shield? Just paraphrasing.
Yeah, I think that question is probably better answered by the defense primes. But I can tell you that, Shield AI has worked on this longer and invested far more than anybody else. We are flying far more airplanes, far more often, and the next closest is probably kind of 100x below in terms of flight hours, if not 1,000x. I mean, it's a pretty big difference between the scale of deployment and the capability of the deployments that are out there right now.
Brad.
How important is the Replicator initiative that the DoD announced last year to your business and the opportunity set for other companies?
It's hard to say. So I think the Replicator initiative, the question was, how important is the Replicator initiative to our company and companies like it? And the Replicator initiative, if you don't know, is a program, I guess it's not a program, an initiative sponsored by the Deputy Secretary of Defense, Kathleen Hicks, to field intelligent, affordable mass and try to do it in a time frame of relevance to deter conflict in the Pacific. I think that its intentions are in the right place. I think there's a lot of work to be done to make that program. There's a lot of work to be done between kind of here and achieving the intent. And so, look, we're ready to support. I think a lot of companies are ready to support, and we're just kind of waiting and watching to see how it unfolds.
Anybody else? Please.
When you were raising capital initially with VCs, did a lot of them decline you because you were making an offensive weapon system, or was it because it was specifically autonomy, and at that time autonomy was really also out of vogue, in addition to, like you mentioned, defense weapons?
The question is, were we declined from our early venture opportunities because we were making, or because of the offensive capabilities, or whether it was for autonomy reasons or something else? I think a lot of people were hesitant to invest in anything that had the potential to be part of a kill chain. So, full stop. I think that's changed substantially over the last 9 years, and I think Larsen wrote a blog post on it. It's kind of a stunning turnabout in terms of the attitudes of the tech community toward defense and national security applications. And I think that was meaningful, but I think that was a large fraction. And then there's also this pretty sad track record of companies with a pretty sad track record of companies succeeding in the defense market, right? The only ones that have done it, right, that had become billion-dollar organizations in the last 20 years, 3 of them were started by billionaires. And this was told to me, actually, in my first fundraise, because I pointed out Palantir and I pointed out SpaceX. And they said both of those were started by billionaires. Are you one? And I was like, no. and then even Anduril, which people are probably familiar with, was started by another billionaire. So Shield AI is sort of the only defense tech company that was started by, right, non-billionaires. And it's just very hard to get traction in this market.
Well, thank you all for coming. Thank you, Ryan from Shield AI, for sharing your experiences with us here today. Let's give Ryan a round of applause. Thank you so much.
I also want to, oh, my mic's off. I wanted to say one more thing. Larsen thanked me for what we're doing, and the thing that I want to say is that I want to thank people like Larsen who have put their life on the line to protect people, to stand up for good values. The work that they do is far harder than any of the work that we are ever asked to do, and I am truly grateful for people like my brother, like Larsen, and so many other people that have served in uniform. I've had the opportunity to learn more about what they have done, what they do every day, and the sacrifices that they make. And it's amazing. So thank you, Larsen.
Thank you.